Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Musings from the Mount podcast, where we explore the intersection of spirituality, psychology, and global consciousness. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. Today, I'm joined by Michael Lindfield, and we explore the concepts of divine discontent and noble restlessness. We'll discuss how these spiritual tensions differ from everyday dissatisfaction, their role in personal growth, and why comfort can sometimes hinder our spiritual progress. We share insights from the Agni Yoga teachings, and we reflect on our personal experiences with these powerful forces. Join us as we delve into the nature of spiritual striving, the balance between material and spiritual pursuits, and how to respond authentically to life's deeper callings. We hope you enjoy the episode. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We are incredibly grateful and honored by your support. Back to the podcast. The both of us fall into this category, and I think most people listening to this podcast would fall into the category of a spiritual seeker. We're people that, for some reason, felt a calling or a pull towards an introspection or a drive to find out more, to find, to really search for and mine this vein of richness that seems to be absent from the mundane life. Mm-hmm. And when you suggested the topic of this podcast being divine discontent or noble restlessness, and it just sparked so much, both personally for me and before I had the sort of lexicon for this. But these concepts, can you first just define what is, divine discontent or noble restlessness, and how that kind of plays out for someone that is a spiritual seeker?
Wow, that's a tall order. Let me just reflect on my understanding of, how I arrived at my understanding. Like you, most of my life, even though I've been calm and peaceful during certain periods, there's always been an inner restlessness, like there's more. And we mentioned a couple of podcasts ago that the call of life is like this, what could you call it? It's a compelling, irresistible, attractive proposition. It's a magnetic appeal from life to us. And we're like the iron filings that get called by the magnet to create a new order in our lives. So for me, there are two levels to discontent. One is the discontent of my personality. I don't have enough. I don't have enough belongings, don't have enough money, don't have enough love. I'm not in the right place. I'm not with the right people. I'm not happy with my life. There's the divine discontent, which has nothing to do with emotional turmoil. Divine discontent is this creative tension that says there is more. So my divine discontent is different from my personal discontent. Personal discontent is usually solved, the personality believes it's solved by acquisition. I acquire more things. Where, for me, the path to walk when one is touched by this divine discontent is actually to divest oneself of all the baggage and to reinvest one's energy into that which is truly calling. So, for instance, noble restlessness, that phrase comes from the Agni Yoga teachings. It's mentioned, particularly, there's one paragraph or sloka in Fiery World 2. And if anyone wants to check it out, it's sloka 42. And it says, I'll give you the sort of abbreviated version. It says, to turn to the future is not at all easy. It sounds simple, to leave the past and look to the future. It is both simple and beautiful, but how shall we light the bonfires of the past? How do we transmute and burn everything from the past? And where shall we find the fires to illumine the future? Then it says, the attainment of the spirit will prompt how to find these boundaries and measures, but how to squeeze the heroic deed into everyday life. Fortunately, every heart is a ready purse for achievement. That means it can contain the gold that is there. And then this is a really interesting statement. In all times, the population has been divided into settlers and nomads. The nomads moved by the power of search for achievement. They had no place of their own, but for the future they found the strength of achievement. Such striving of the heart is inherent in every human life. Amidst the precipitants resulting from heroic achievements must be found this noble restlessness, leading into the future. Only thus may one escape the snares of the past. So the only way to unhook from the discontent of the past is to be able to hear the call of this incredibly magnetic appeal of the soul or life, whatever we want to call it, and begin to respond to it. It then shifts, as the Buddha would say, when you have let go of your attachment to material things, you can work with matter, you're not attached to it. You can live in an incarnated form, you're not attached to it. You can be in the world, but not of it. And so noble restlessness is what the Agni Yoga teachings talk about. And as you hinted at, Joey, in the spiritual lineage that we're part of, particularly in the writings from Alice Bailey, it talks about divine dissatisfaction, divine discontent. And this is this gap between where we're currently at and where we're called to be. It's a spark gap. If the spark gap gets too big, we feel it's impossible and we go into some sort of existential crisis. So anyway, I'll stop there because there's more to explore, but that's my sort of initial response to your question. What does it spark in you?
Well, for me, it's interesting because, as I kind of said before I even had the terminology or the words for this, for me, the whole reason why I got clean and got my life back together was the call to pursue, the study, the spiritual, and it's going through that process was very different from the people that were my contemporaries also going through that process at the same time. People who kind of came into their journey at the same time. Most people were motivated by getting a job and getting a good apartment and then getting a house, getting a car, and that wasn't interesting to me at all. And I couldn't really define it. It was this pursuit of this spiritual path,
right,
and this development. And then I look back and, that was such a spotlight, but then I look back at my entire life and it's also that same path.
Yes. I think, you and I are similar in that respect. Yeah. Our paths may look a little different on the outside, not much, but it's like I grew up saying, my God, there must be more to this than what I'm currently experiencing. What's this all about?
Right.
And so if we go back to the whole idea of noble restlessness, it does not allow us to sink into comfortability. And comfortability, as Agni Yoga teaching says, is the graveyard of the spirit. Comfortably numb, Pink Floyd, whatever you want to quote.
Right.
When you're comfortable, it's okay to be at ease and to be healthy and to be feeling good, but comfortable in the end means that, now I can lie down in a fetal position or lie down and just rest. I don't have to do anything anymore. There's nothing calling me to do anything. I am comfortable. And therefore, that presses the pause button. But after a while, the compelling call of life is registered somewhere at some level inside of us, and we start to respond to it, either in the way you describe some people that go out and acquire things. You go out and do binge shopping at Costco or whatever it is, or whatever the way of responding to that call, or you follow a spiritual path. But it's always this gap between what we sense is what we need and where we're currently at. So, as you mentioned, it moves from acquisition to divestiture. And then with one's life energy is a question of where do I invest it? Do I invest it in acquiring wisdom, which is the pursuit of the spiritual path? But you can't acquire wisdom. Wisdom is gained as you tread the spiritual path consciously. So the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you don't, oh, right, I've come to the end of the rainbow. Where's my gold? Mm-hmm. The gold is the alchemical process that happens inside you as you walk the path. You become the gold as you walk the path.
I think that's a very important concept that people really, because you have the adventurous history of people searching for the water of life or the
El Dorado,
yeah. Or the Holy Grail, and what's lost is that it's the journey and what you become, what you gain from the journey.
Well, for instance, the Grail is a very powerful symbol in Western mystery tradition, and it's always the emerald cup. It's said to be the emerald cup that they used at the Last Supper. Then Joseph of Arimathea brought it to Britain, after the death of Jesus, and there's a whole history there about Joseph coming to Britain and planting his staff in the ground, which grew as the Glastonbury thorn. There's all these wonderful things, but whether you're looking at Wagner and the whole journey of Parsifal and the search for the Holy Grail is the chalice of the heart, and the chalice of the heart is where you accumulate the riches of life. Not the gems and the material riches, but the riches of the wisdom that you've learned. And once the chalice is filled, you have to drain it. You have to empty it. You have to give it away. You have to drain your chalice. And as you continue to give it away, it's filled up again. But if you fill it up and say, that's it, it's all mine, you can't receive more. So the chalice is not so much it is a cup, but it's more a universal pipeline of goodness that flows through you, and you're responsible for that part of the pipeline. The pipeline is a chain of hearts through the cosmos, right. And it passes through each human heart.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So that's the Grail. And Monty Python's Search of the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
But it always goes back to there is this call of life, and how we respond to it depends on our state of consciousness. And so for a lot of people, when you look at divine discontent, it's because I have failed in what I set out to do as a human being. I don't have the money I want. I don't have the position. I don't have this. This was my ideal of what success is. The spiritual path, success is not measured in how much we have. Success is measured in how much love can flow through me at any moment into the world. But that's not a better than thou kind of success. Mm-hmm. We then are conscripted by life to be part of its irrigation system.
Right.
Hey, we're here to sprinkle love. Spread the love around.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds a little pie in the sky, but I see this call, the deep call of life does create noble restlessness or divine discontent. The only way you can respond to divine discontent is once you have worked through all the feelings of the personality that it needs more. Because as you and I know, a pattern can never be satisfied. You can never fulfill a pattern. It always wants more. Whatever the addiction is, whether it's drugs, money, sex, if it's an addiction and it becomes what you seek in life, it never can be fulfilled. The only thing that leads to fulfillment is when your life is fully filled with spirit. Mm-hmm. It is inspired.
Yeah.
It is, if you like, this pipeline for the power of love to flow through. These are not just high concepts. for me, this is the task. We're building the pipeline each day. This is our project. Mm-hmm. How do we build the pipeline? Well, keep your heart open. What's coming through the pipeline?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's coming through my words? What's coming through my thoughts? Mm-hmm. What's coming through my actions? See, that's the pipeline. We talked about it last time, the power of speech. Mm-hmm. It really is the power of beingness.
Yeah.
How I show up as part of, as I say, the spiritual irrigation system of the universe.
It is such a different context than the ego-driven, because like just the whole concept of filling up the chalice and then emptying the chalice. That kind of goes counter to everything that we're certainly taught that's important, at least in Western tradition.
Look, I've worked hard for the contents of this chalice. I'm not going to give it up now.
Right.
I've invested all my life in filling this chalice up.
Right. And then, you just think like, how do you balance that? How do you balance the desire for spiritual improvement, or the concept even of having spiritual goals seems to almost run counter to that. Like, yeah. I'm also taking back to the whole story of the Buddha, who came from a very wealthy background,
right,
and had everything,
right,
but still, sought out this deeper meaning to life, this deeper enrichment.
Well, let me respond to that by going back to a story from Agni Yoga. We talked about the nomads and the settlers just now in that quote. There is another passage in the Agni Yoga teachings which talks about the origin of mountains. And so I want to read you this basically story of creation. When the planetary creator toiled over the formation of the earth, he gave attention to fertile plains which could provide people with a quiet agriculture. But the mother of the world said, "Verily, people will find bread and trade in the plains, but when gold will pollute the plains, whither shall go the pure in spirit to gather strength? Either let them have wings, or let them have mountains, in order to escape from gold," the physical gold.
Wow.
And the Creator answered, this is wisdom. "It is too early to give wings to people. They would carry death and destruction. But let us give them mountains, even if some be afraid of them. For others they will be salvation. Thus, there are two kinds of people of the plains and people of the mountains." It's sort of similar to the settlers and the nomads. Mm-hmm. But this was, you can read a lot into this.
I think we could almost spend an entire episode just on a couple of those lines.
Which ones touched you?
Well, the fact that we're at Meditation Mount recording this podcast speaks volumes to what kind of people we are and what kind of path that we went through. I mean, it's certainly not a if you're someone who is my age, and this is not a lucrative path you go down. This is not you're not looking to it's completely driven by something else. Having left the sort of entertainment industry, that's not the path you go down if you're looking for material enrichment.
Well, I know occasionally we go back and look at some biblical references, and they talk about the prodigal son. I also want to say it's the prodigal daughter. It's the prodigal child. Let's call it the prodigal child. The prodigal child left the father's house, left that union with spirit, went out into the world to seek their fortune, to experience life, and lived a riotous life, just like St. Francis did in the early days before he got the call, and then realized, I'm not happy. I'm not content. I need to return home. I need to go back to my father's house, which is symbolic as I need to return to a spiritual path. And then you've sort of, well, where am I? And you've got to sort of reset. You've got to find out, well, where am I? I'm lost. How do I get back? How do I get home?
Right.
Well, in recent podcast, we talked about the Great Reset and how you listen and how you use your navigational aids to get back on course. So the prodigal child said, I want to return to the Father's house or spirit house. Therefore, that was the destination that was plugged into the navigating system, the GPS. And then by highways and byways, eventually found their way home. So there are still people who are exploring what it means to be fulfilled by filling themselves full of matter. And then when they realize that you can't be totally satiated, totally fulfilled by accumulation, that it's a spiritual appetite, that's the hunger. You can have as much money as you like, it doesn't make you happy. It gives you a certain quanta of energy, and you can do stuff with it, and it's a temporary illusion of happiness. But I believe that the true gold that we're seeking is the love and wisdom of the soul, Solomon's gold. And therefore, once we choose to return home, we have a different measure of success. And it's very, very different. So if you are comparing yourself to somebody else and they've got more than you, you may feel less than them. If you look around and see the principle of essential divinity at work, where everyone is sacred and the core of everybody is essentially divine, we're all fractals of this one life, then we're going to help each other realize who we are and reveal who we are. That's why we work together.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about, I know in the Agni Yoga tradition, it kind of touches on this idea of inner tension and cultivating that inner tension.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something for me that has always been there because up until 21, 22, I was sort of raised to be a professional athlete. I was, going to school on an athletic scholarship, but all of my interests were in the arts and in all these other, it was these two poles, and it created this constant tension. And, the author Douglas Brinkley, I was doing an event and he was there, and I was talking to him, and he said, that's a beautiful tension that you have. You should never get rid of that. And I didn't understand it at the time, but it was a beautiful tension. And then when I did leave the athletic world and went just purely into the arts, into music, I found myself having to cultivate a tension. There was, a balance there.
We have to have tension between the poles, otherwise there was no spark between them. It goes back to the sparking gap. It's the tension between positive and negative poles. Look at a battery. It's the creative tension. Also, tension, when you think of it in spiritual terms, in Agni Yoga teaching, is called striving. You strive towards something. That doesn't mean I'm going to go to the top of that mountain and be the first person to climb that mountain. So it isn't striving to show you're better. Striving is your dynamic response to the call of life. Because the call of life issues forth from, once again, the Agni Yoga teaching calls it the cosmic magnet. This compelling, attractive force, an irresistible force. In the end, you have to respond to it. And it creates a tension. The tension is that state of being and where you're currently at. And so it will call you to strive. And Agni Yoga says, look, there are different ways to get there. There are certain paths where it'll take you through the countryside and by the meadows and the brooks and that. Agni Yoga is going to take you straight up the mountain, steepest path, toughest way.
Okay, that's good.
Not because to show that you're macho,
right?
But because of the need of the world, the urgency of the time, and why not go for it?
Is that sort of the harnessing of the fiery energy?
It's fire.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
See, Agni Yoga is the yoga of fire.
Right. Okay.
And in the end, striving, once I strive with a fiery heart, I come into resonance with the great magnet. And the cosmic magnet is that which calls into creation everything and appeals to the magnet inside of me, the poles inside of me. And I become tense. Now, when I become tense in my personality, I feel tension. I feel emotional stress. I feel mental stress. I feel physical tiredness. But tension in the spiritual world is a very different proposition. In fact, if you didn't have tension, it'd be a flat line. And you and I know when you look at a cardiogram reading, a flat line is death, man. You've got to have waves. You've got to have movement. You've got to have something in motion. So how do we set things in motion without it becoming this rat race, like on the big hamster wheel of life?
Yeah, I think that's the, in terms of practical applications, in terms of you're sitting here listening to this, okay, this all sounds noble and grand, but what does that mean when I have, I'm taking care of kids, or I have, a family, or I'm running a business, and what does that mean for me?
Well,
like, how do you balance that?
For me, it's balance and reconcile. Rather than saying, oh gosh, I wish I wasn't doing this. You say, this is what I'm currently doing, and this is what I'm now being called to. What's the gap between? How do I bring these two into alignment so they're not different things? It may be that I have to change what I'm doing, where I'm living, where I'm working, with the people with whom I spend my time. That's just a natural recalibration when you say yes and start responding to the magnetic call of life. What I find is important is I cannot deny where I'm at. Or I wish I didn't feel this way. I wish I did. No, this is how you feel at one level of your personality, because this is how far you've evolved. However, inside of you, this is the call you feel. How do I handle those two calls, those two states of being? And if I had non-attachment to both, it's easier than if I'm attached to, well, I have to be better and I shouldn't be this way. It's how do I accept who I am and still have this forward movement in life so I don't think that my life's a failure or that I'm not good enough. It goes back to, am I good enough? Am I good enough for myself? Am I good enough for you? Am I good enough in the eyes of society? What does it mean, Joey, to be good enough?
That's a very good question. On some level, I just sticking with this whole theme. It's the understanding that is a cup that can never be filled, and you understand that, but you undertake this journey anyway. Like, you understand that you're never. We were talking about before we started the podcast, Jeff Beck, and like what an incredible guitar player is. But that doesn't mean that I still don't play guitar.
Well, and that was it. I realized that there's no way I could ever be like Jeff Beck. I actually had the privilege of meeting him when he was playing in Stockholm at a club there. And he's one of the greatest guitarists. There's been a lot of great guitarists. But what I loved about him, he was so free-form in the most ordered way. The lyricism that came out of him, he was a free spirit who could translate what was on the inside on the outside musically. It was incredible. And so what I don't do when I play my guitar at night is compare myself to Jeff Beck. All I want to do is to have the music that comes out of me be an expression of what I feel inside. It's a way of keeping field notes. It's field notes. And musically.
Field notes of your soul's journey.
Yeah. Field notes could be written notes with words, but they're notes. They're the field notes. So for me, and I know there are most people, well, I think most people on the planet are better at me than most things. And therefore it's not a put down. It's a check saying, this is where I'm currently at. Can I accept where I'm currently at without getting down on myself? And there is a wonderful group of 18 women here in the Ojai Valley called the Moon Valley Choir. And one of the songs they sing is The Pain of Comparison. It's a wonderful song. So every time you compare, there's always the pain when you compare.
Yeah.
The pain of comparison. But what we do with striving is not compare ourselves. We respond to the call of life at its deepest level.
Yeah.
And when we do that wholeheartedly, it shifts everything. And like you talked about how it got you clean. I went cold turkey overnight, changed everything. My whole orientation to life changed because of something somebody said to me. And we've named this in the podcast before, but let me just say it again. When somebody said to me, Michael, what are you doing with your life and to yourself? Do you realize that the lives inside your body, inside your universe of self, look to you as the great steward, the God? They need you to bring order and love and healing. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I went, oh my God. I was always the victim. I was always the person that didn't have enough. Therefore, I was out there, plundering at all levels.
Yeah.
And therefore, that turnaround was like, oh my God. It was life calling me, say, look, you are part of who I am. You're responsible for an aspect of myself, which is called Michael, your universe of self, your ecosystem of self. This is where you practice. This is where you show up. This is where your spiritual journey starts. And then you work with others to bring stewardship and kindness and wholesome living, health, etc., to your community, to your world, not as a missionary, but as a heartfelt calling.
Yeah.
So that's what it happened to me, and so I didn't just read it in a book. Oh, I think I better get off drugs.
No, it was the same for me. It happened for me, and I didn't have any of the background or terminology or to describe it, but it was happening. It was very real and palpable. I also find it interesting when we're talking about tension, and traditionally if you were going to study the Kabbalah, you had to be married, you had to be a man, but you had to be in your 40s, and you had to be you had to have all this kind of let's say, like, in order to go up the mountain, you first had to have the planes in order. You had to have your life in order because what you were going to study was so intense, and it could rock your world. And I found that interesting that there is that tension in the study.
There is tension. And think about tension in a structure. We talked about Bucky Fuller and his geodesic dome when we did the podcast on triangles.
Right.
It's tension, but how is the tension held? The tension in a geodesic dome is distributed through this lattice work of triangles. Therefore, it supports each other. You talk about a building needing to have structural integrity. So the tensions are there and balanced. They're not pulling things off center, so the building doesn't collapse. If you transfer that to the work of responding to the call of spirit, it's what we called building the temple of self. We said that the true art of Freemasonry is the building of the sacred temple of self. And when you build the temple of self, you realize it has to have structural integrity. What is structural integrity? It means when the inner architecture, the inner template, actually is the outer structure and shape of your life. And the other thing for me about inner and outer integrity is that if I'm not in integrity, then my structure is weakened and it can collapse.
Yeah.
So the more you get into building this temple of self, striving to be the temple builder, guess what? You find out there are certain codes you have to build to. Before, you just thought, I can build anything, like a little shack out of driftwood. Actually, the temple of self has some, you have to build to code.
This is a good point, because this is something that I have resistance to, it's like that, because I've always been, I want to do it myself. I want to discover it myself. I don't want anyone to tell me how to do anything. And then you find out, well, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. The people have done a lot of work in this area.
Well, and when I say you've got to build it to code, it isn't like the local county saying, hey, look, this handrail is 2 inches too low. You've got to raise it, which is what happened here at Meditation Mountain. We had an inspection a number of years ago. Yeah. The handrail down to here where we're doing the recording. They said, well, no, you need to raise it 2 inches and you need to use this. And we went, what? Come on. No, this is the code. Yeah. Now, when you build the temple of self, when you understand the spiritual codes, they're the principles. It's love. It's the understanding that each of us is a divine being, and therefore what we're building is an extension and an expansion of the original creation. What is the temple of self? It's where life can express. Where can life express? In a place that allows it to be at home. Where can spirit be at home? Where is living in integrity with itself? Where the outside mirrors the inside. And the gap between the inside and the outside is the creative tension. So if you don't have tension, you don't have juice. The tension happens when I'm emotionally tense because I got conflicting emotions. I've got patterns that are unresolved. I've got conflicting thoughts. That kind of tension is destructive. Destructive in one respect, but in the end, liberating. Okay. Because if I've got thoughts that are really unhelpful, at some point, they've got to be let go of. And they'll come to a head when the tension gets too great. Suddenly I realize the way I'm thinking, my belief has become so crystallized, I've become so fanatical.
Yeah. And isn't that the big fear and the big block for people? You almost, there's that kind of phrase, I'm going to paraphrase it, familiar hell is more comfortable than an unfamiliar heaven.
Well,
you
exactly.
surround yourself with these fears.
The devil you know is better than the devil you don't know kind of thing, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It goes back to comfort. And then the other thing, we talked about striving, which is this dynamic, fiery response to the call of life. The other word that's used a lot in Agni Yoga is daring.
Okay.
Daring is a fiery act.
Yeah. And does this stem from the idea that there has to be this self-effort?
It's self-effort, but it's an absolute no holds barred, no half measures. Okay. Which has nothing to do with macho again. It just means when you are on the spiritual path, there are no half measures. You're either all in or you're not.
Yeah.
And that's so tough because there's part of me that resists, no, I don't want to be all in. I mean, I'll give part of it, I'll do part of it, but I want to claim this space to satisfy my addictions. You sort of try to bargain with life, and in the end, you can't bargain with life. You can't negotiate because life is sending out this signal that says, come to me, be me, be me. And if you're going to be life, then you have to conform with the signal. You have to come into resonance with the signal. And therefore, the striving requires daring. And one of the beautiful things about Agni Yoga, one of the phrases that I love the most is that it is impossible to leap a chasm in 2 bounds.
I've never heard that before, but that's amazing. You say that again?
Well, it goes back to
so obvious, but also so.
I take people and those who are listening back to the Matrix?
Yeah,
mouse, load the jump program.
That's right.
So Neo has to leap across these 2 buildings. Why does he fall? There's a flicker of doubt. A flicker of doubt.
Yeah.
And the flicker of doubt disempowered him, and he didn't make it. So daring is the absolute faith and knowing that it's possible, and then doing it in a way where you realize that. You actually realize that. You make it real. Now, daring doesn't mean foolhardy.
Right.
It simply means once you've got the call, saying yes is saying yes. I've tried to bargain for, are you okay with 80%?
Right.
Can we do the 80-20 rule here?
A lot of people are.
I'll give you, I render unto Caesar the things of the Caesar and unto God the things of the God. So God, can I give you 80% and Caesar the 20%? Mm-hmm. Before it was the other way around. It was 80-20 to Caesar. No. When life calls, it wants to be at one with you. Therefore, it's 100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's calling to you? It's your own essential divinity, which is part of the one. Mm-hmm. So it isn't somebody, once again, it's not somebody telling you what to do or ordering you about. It's life calling you to a higher order, which is who you are, which is who we are. Yeah. Now, once we do that willingly and consciously, using our free will, then we step onto this striving path, this daring path, this fiery path. We step onto the path of, if you can call it, not so much spiritual attainment. I think that word attainment, for me, is embodiment and revelation. Right. I didn't attain love. Yeah. I learned to...
It's almost like you kind of you pulled down the blinds, or you opened the blinds. It's always been there, but you haven't been able to see it. So it's not like, because the love is surrounding us at all times, but we refuse to see it or accept it.
That's a great image, and it reminds me of a series of images that I created, cartoons. So somebody gets up in the morning and it's dark inside their house, and then they open the blinds and the sun's shining, and they went, oh, I want to go outside in the sun. Mm-hmm. I want to go and lie in the sun and be a sunbather. Yeah. So out they go into their house, and suddenly from their cool, dark house, they're in the sun. They lie down and say, oh, this is wonderful. Then they realize that wherever they lie, whatever position they take up, only half of their body is illumined by the sun. Mm. The other half is always in darkness. The only way you can fully have the sunshine in you is to have the sunshine in you, is to release the fire of love inside the heart. Therefore, you radiate love from your own center. When you do that, there are no shadows. You do not cast a shadow. Mm.
That's a great concept. That's a great image to hold in your head. And that's actually something we're striving for in terms of like a goal that's non-ego driven or non-material.
And then there's this phrase from the teachings that says, be like the sun. Mm-hmm. Give freely of your love, light, and warmth, asking for nothing in return. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a sort of an Eastern piece of advice.
Yeah, and that's something that we can all relate to. I mean, it's right there every day. It's up there. Yeah, I mean, it's just so if you need a very practical, hands-on example, there's a very easy one. It also makes sense why the sun is around so many different traditions and religions. The sun is so important as the main focal point.
It's the source of illumination. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to go sort of double click and go really esoteric, really occult here. The earth itself one day will emit light. At the moment, it's a non-sacred planet. It still reflects light. Mm-hmm. But when the nuclear heart of its being radiates love and light and power, it'll be a sun. Mm. It'll be a radiant planet. When we radiate light and love and spiritual power from the heart of our being, we become beings of radiance, which once again is not, well, I'm more radiant than you. It's the release of light in matter. We talked about this before. Yeah. It's the release of love into the world. So we have the choice. The question is, we're basing our choice on what call? Mm-hmm. The call from the personality that says, I want more of this, or the call from the spirit that says, you are more than this. Yeah. We are so much more than how we're currently behaving, is one of my favorite phrases from psychosynthesis.
Yeah. There's a lot of potential there. There's still a lot of...
Well, okay, what's your understanding about electrical potential?
About electrical potential? I mean, my understanding that there's unlimited. Like the universe is an electrical universe, just waiting to be harnessed.
Okay. So what about a dynamo what's fueled by this gap between where we are and where we're called to go? So divine discontent is a dynamo.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not like it's not the hamster wheel of life and that's creating electricity.
Yeah.
But the fact that we are responding to life actually reproduces and recreates that power around us. And we become distributors of energy. We give back to the grid.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you live off the grid and spiritually?
That's a good question.
Not by cutting yourself off, but by not being dependent, but by being a source of power where you share your power with others. Now, this is a long way off, Joey. We're talking like, I don't know how many more incarnations it's going to take for all of us to get to a point where we are generating power and not just being consumers of power.
Well, I mean, in that vein, speaking of getting there, I mean, I know that we don't put a lot of emphasis necessarily on this, in the kind of the work that we do. But what is the role of like the guru or the teacher in this kind of journey? I mean, like.
This is classic because I remember I went through the struggle. Well, the guru, that was part of the Piscean age. Yeah, now we don't need teachers. We're doing it ourselves and we're doing it as groups. And I'm going, and then you come to the Agni Yoga teachings where it says, look, there is one immutable principle that's going to endure forever. It's called hierarchy. And then you, what?
Yeah.
But then you understand what hierarchy means. It's more like holarchy. It's not somebody telling you what to do. It's not being subservient to anybody. It basically says, look, there are those levels of consciousness that have a greater ability to love and to hold life together. If that didn't exist, we couldn't be here. There has to be the container. The container is held by a consciousness. So, for instance, we talk about the masters of wisdom. We've named them before as postgraduate humans. They've graduated the classroom of Earth with degrees. They've earned a degree. It isn't a diploma that they're handed. They now embody love, wisdom. We're still striving to reach that point where love and wisdom live inside us as the substance of who we are. So if I have access to mentors who already embody what I'm striving to achieve, I mean, really dumb not to utilize their kind offer of being part of this great chain of blessing. Hey, I'll give you a hand up. Now you give somebody a hand up, or whatever the analogy is. So for me, it's a benevolent, it has nothing to do with a group of people having power over me. That, unfortunately, is the thought form that came out of the abuse and misuse of power. We're talking about a holarchy of love and wisdom. Its only intent is to help life grow. Each one of us to fulfill our destiny, to be the truth we are, to live in integrity together. So there's no fear attached to that. Nobody's telling me what to do. In fact, they're not allowed to tell us what to do. The Syrian law of freedom that we touched on a couple of podcasts ago says, look, the whole idea of this time on earth is to see, can spirit, buried deep in matter, basically pull itself up by its own bootstraps? Can you and I, can the Joeys and Michaels of the world say, hey, no, there's something more. I choose to live a different way. Nobody told me what to do. You decided to kick it and go clean because of an inner call. Same with me. Where did that inner call come from? It came from life through my soul. The fact that I chose to do it changes everything. Because I was being helped by these mentors who were sort of like cheering me on with their love and their compassion and their energetic support. Just as when raising children, You give them love and energetic support. Sometimes you want to tell them what to do. But for the most part, you're helping them discover for themselves. The only advice that I really gave to my kids, I think it was one sentence out of Shakespeare, like, to thine own self be true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you do that, life calls to you.
It certainly does. And I know it from my experience. The further first, this is just my experience, but the further I got away from that, the more, the mitts came off of life to sort of smack me back towards the the path that I was supposed to be on. Well, it's like, and sometimes when you're on the path, you feel a complete absence of that, so you feel a little lost. Like, am I even doing the right thing? But then when I would stroll straight too far, it's almost like there'd be this big mitt smacking me back towards
but there is a certain tolerance level. You're allowed certain tolerance.
Yeah.
And when you stray out of that tolerance, the soul says, remember, we agreed to follow this path.
Yeah. I mean, there have been times in my life where that was so powerful that it almost felt physical pain to proceed in the direction I was going. And like, it was like utter madness. And then it all went away when you just turn your direction a couple of degrees, and it's like, okay, now you're back on the right path.
Well, because then instead of being part of evolution, you are turning your back on that and beginning to sort of devolve.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because life is calling itself to reveal itself.
Yeah.
And once you get that, then you allow life to reveal itself through your heart, through your total being. And what I'm learning is, it sounds so simplistic and so difficult, is love, compassion, respect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what if somebody does this to me? What if somebody does that to me? How are you going to react? Why, isn't that a sign of weakness? Then you realize in the end, when love prevails, there is just this golden state of being. And I'm not talking about the Golden State, California. I'm talking about a golden state of being. And so the noble restlessness that we sort of launched our conversation today with, the noble restlessness is that which always keeps us moving towards that cosmic magnet. It's the pull of the magnet on my life. And it's not a magnet that is separate from me. I am a fractal of that magnet. The magnet is the homecoming. I'm being called home. And home is not an escape from here. Home is an expansion of consciousness that can embrace here and bring love and light into the now, into the here and now. So noble restlessness, if I'm feeling troubled and restless, I got to ask myself, where's it coming from? Is it coming from an unresolved pattern that I still am hooked into? Is it coming from this restlessness saying, don't get stuck, don't get too comfortable, keep moving? But then do we ever find peace? I can find more peace when I even let go of the images that we've even been talking about here. So that the striving is not I have to strive. If I'm not striving, I'm not living a spiritual path. What I'm basically saying is, let's strip away all the labels. Let's respond to the call of life in the most authentic and honest way that each of us can, from a place of love and caring. Let that be the path. Let that be the noble restlessness that stirs us into action.
Wow. That's beautiful. I think that's a good place to wrap, too.
Yeah, I have no more words.
You've emptied your chalice.
I've emptied my chalice. Now I'm going to have a cup of tea.
All right, fill it back up. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Michael. That was a great episode.
Yeah, thank you, Joey. Okay. I appreciate these explorations because they're real.
Yeah.
They are realizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Bye-bye.